So a lot of the experience that I have now is self-taught. It's things actually learning from what we did over, the span of 8 years. And as the business went from being a startup to having a few employees to then growing and then expanding into different states across Australia and then offering different services, so nursing, occupational therapy, podiatry, we had to adapt and change along, Then you've got COVID in the middle of that. We had to learn to adapt as we went along. So it was a very intensive 8 years of learning hands-on.
Amazing, man. Welcome on the Freedom Podcast.
Thank you, man. So excited to be here.
Yeah, we've got a very, very special episode with our guest, Matthew Bassilios. And this is a man with a serious entrepreneurship history and experience. We're all going to learn a lot. I'm going to take a lot of notes. Matthew has grown his healthcare business to over multiple 8 figures, and he's going to share his life journey today, what inspired him to start a business, how he has grown it, what was the niche, what was the industry, and we're going to dive into what he's currently doing with his life right now, because he's managed to exit the business and he's up for even bigger things. So thank you so much for coming. It's a pleasure. And the first thing I would love to ask you, Matthew, and we already had multiple conversations before, and it was just something I'm very fascinated about, people's lives journey and their stories and how they kind of progress throughout life. Could you share where you grew up, how you, your last name you just mentioned from Egypt?
Yeah, that's
Could
right.
you share a little bit about your family history, how you grew up here, and how you started entrepreneurship?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, like you said, we've spoken a bit about this, but my background is Egyptian. My parents had migrated here before I was born, and we grew up over in the city, lived in housing commission. They were migrants, kind of finding their feet. They tried a number of different things, but I think really that's where I got my entrepreneurial spirit from. Being migrants, trying to find a way for themselves. I remember they had a takeaway shop when I was quite young, and I remember being at school and coming home from school and being in the shop and sweeping, folding tables and chairs and that kind of thing. So yeah, that's a little bit about my background. And then I grew up with a lot of health issues. So obviously here in Melbourne, it's beautiful but quite cold. So I had a lot of asthma, was in and out of hospital. When I was about 10, my parents went on a holiday, or before that, they went on a holiday to the Gold Coast and loved the weather. So they actually decided to uproot everything, move away from all of their family, and move over to the beautiful sunny Gold Coast, which, at the time I really struggled with because I've got quite a large family. My dad has 10 brothers and a sister.
Wow.
And all my cousins, uncles, aunties, grandparents were all here. So yeah, that was really difficult for me. But yeah, I finished school and then ended up moving back here to Melbourne to be back with my family and have loved it ever since.
Amazing. We've actually been to Egypt 3 times. Sharm el Sheikh, I think, is the area where there's beautiful coral reefs, like the Nemo fish, all this kind of stuff. And one of the fun things is the street vendors it's very entrepreneurial, the street vendors in Egypt, they're fighting hard for their sale, and they're pulling on you, and they're hey, they've got all these funny things. And one of the things that I learned is la'a. You have to say la'a. I think it's in Arabic, something go away or something. No.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was one of that's something I just remember right now. And then we've seen the beautiful pyramid and everything like that. And I can imagine how you have it's a cultural thing, having a big family. Your origins are hot weather, right? That is something that I'm from Russia originally, so for me cold is pretty good.
You love this.
Cold, the winters where I thrive indeed. But I totally resonate with your story thus far. And then you lived in the Gold Coast for some time, and you came back?
Yeah, so lived there for about 7 years. So moved there when I was 10, finished primary school, did high school there. And I was actually still 17 when I moved back here. So I moved here prior to my 18th birthday. For me, it was always a goal to kind of move back here to be closer to family. And I was lucky enough to be quite smart, did pretty well in school, managed to get into physio, and decided that, cool, it was an opportunity for me to move back here and to study university here in Melbourne.
Yeah, because in the Gold Coast, I mean, really Melbourne, Sydney is where all the universities are and the main education. And you studied physiotherapy, is
That's
that
right,
correct?
physiotherapy, yeah.
Physiotherapy. And eventually, I'm curious on your like epiphany of starting Empower Healthcare,
Yeah.
which is the business you grew to multiple eight figures
Yep.
in the healthcare space. And I'm curious about like what has been like you studied physiotherapy, you probably worked a little bit in the space, but like how did that transition happen?
Yeah, really good question. So I've always been too smart for my own good. I've got ADHD, and I've been pretty good at getting away with things at school, and not necessarily performing at the best of my ability. And honestly, I think university was a bit like that. A 17-year-old moving back here, a bit of freedom, back in the big smoke. Because back then at the time, Gold Coast was very quiet. It still is now, but it is very touristy. Whereas here, there's so much culture. In Melbourne, there are so many restaurants, bars, clubs. It's just full of culture. It's so diverse. So being a 17-year-old, having a car, being able to drive, having that freedom for me, I didn't necessarily do as well as I could have at university. And I think a big part of that is because I wasn't really passionate about physio. But again, I'm also one of those people that when I put my mind to something, I get it done. So I was like, well, I'm here, I've already committed, I'm going to get it done, finish it. So I started, while I was studying, I was actually working at a medical center with my auntie, and there I actually met a physio. So she said, as soon as you graduate, I've got a job lined up for you in my clinic. Cool, right? So I kind of had it handed to me. Didn't really even think about what area of physio I wanted to work in. So I started working in private practice and worked with a lot of sports teams, soccer, football, AFL. And pretty early on realized that I didn't like private practice. I found that working with a lot of athletes, they were quite demanding. They might come to you with an injury and, you might get them 80, 90% better just in the one session, but they were always focused on that 10%. Then I remember a friend of mine said, hey, why don't you try aged care? And I was like, what's aged care? Like, what do you actually do? And so they're like, why don't you come and spend the day with me? And I went and spent the day with her. And I remember that I got so much joy and satisfaction out of working in an aged care facility, because a lot of the people, and I've obviously got grandparents that are older, so I see this for myself firsthand, but a lot of people at that, once they get older and they're in the aged care facilities, tend to be neglected. So I've got pain in my shoulder. Typically, they'll get a doctor to go and see them, and the doctor will just give them some medication. But at the end of the day, no one really cares or tries to understand why they've got that pain. They just put it down to them being old. So I saw an opportunity to go, well, I'm still a physio and I'm just adapting the physio skill set to a different environment. Why don't I be a physio and assess and treat their shoulder, find out what's actually going on, what's causing their pain, address it, and see if that improves their life? Because at the end of the day, they haven't got much longer to go. So for me, it was about trying to help them live out the last of their days as happy, pain-free, and independent as possible. And that's where I really found a bit of a niche in the market. On top of that, I just found it was so enjoyable working with older people. They were so grateful for the time that you'd spend with them, even if it was just a conversation. But I remember one of the things that really got me passionate about this was there was a lady who had constant shoulder pain in both of her shoulders. She'd had it for years and years. Doctors kept increasing her meds. And one day I was like, I need to work out what's going on. When do you get that shoulder pain? When I walk. Cool, let's go for a walk. Let me see. And she had a walker and she was holding her walker like this. And I'm like, well, that might be why, right? Let's lower the handle. Something really simple. Does it now hurt? And she's like, no. Yeah, absolutely. And I was like, this is one person. How many other people are living with pain and are just being overseen? And so for me, that's really where I found that passion for aged care. So found a market and a niche to really be able to provide quality services in residential aged care facilities. And that's essentially where the idea of Empower Healthcare came from.
Yeah, wow. And it's so powerful because indeed with older people, it's kind of like when they're being squeezed by the society, they've worked like they're 30, 40 years paying tax. After they end up in a healthcare facility or somewhere else, usually their children don't really talk to them that often or anything like that. They don't get like the support that they really need. And sometimes like my grandma has dementia as well, so I'm able to provide for her service abroad, but they're like taking care of a small kind of facility with a few people. and yeah, that they just forget things as well. Like they're not realizing that if you're walking like this, you might get shoulder pain.
Yep.
And so that is amazing. And like, how did you, with the healthcare center, was it something like, did you have already the space, or
Yeah.
what was sort of like, what were your first few clients that you had? How were you able to facilitate the service?
So I spent a number of years working for a few organizations that were already in that space.
Okay.
And again, not being overly passionate about physio, but loving helping people and genuinely caring about people and trying to help them. It kind of opened my eyes to the business side. And all of a sudden I started to find that that's what I was passionate about. You know, I wanted to understand how it worked, you know, because obviously this person doesn't have any money to pay for our services, you know, or their family are paying for them to be here. But who's paying the company that I work for them to pay me? So I started to get more intrigued about the business side, worked my way up the corporate ladder. So then kind of stepped up to be a team leader, then an operations manager. Then I did some time in sales. So spent many years working in client relationship management, business development, to get a full picture of the business side of it. And then there was an opportunity working where I actually met someone, and he could see that I had a passion for physio and aged care, and I knew that space, and I had a lot of contacts in that space. Obviously, I haven't worked my way up, but his background was working in recruitment. So he was recruiting into residential aged care facilities. So he would have a contract with them and go, oh, you need a physio, you need a nurse, etc. And what he found was the same thing that I was talking about. He'd be calling these physios and going, what is it that you're passionate about? Why are you looking to leave from where you are into somewhere else? And it's like, you know, no one cares about what we do. So for both of us, there was a lot of synergy, and we were like, look, why don't we start a company where I can oversee the operations and the delivery? You know, you can focus on the recruitment, because in this space, recruitment is the biggest barrier to growth and always was for us moving forward. And that's where Empower Healthcare started. So we started over, you know, we had a little office about the size of this room in his house. For the first 6 months, you know, every day we were on the phones, cold calling aged care facilities, trying to get information, trying to get in front of the right people, going out, presenting. And it got to a point about 6 months in where we started questioning things and go, I don't know if this is going to work out. You know, it's been 6 months of us grinding and we haven't really gotten a client yet. And then remember one day we managed to land our first client, you know. I went in there, I started servicing it myself as a clinician. I blew them away. I found a whole heap of improvements and things that they could make. They had another facility over in another location here in Melbourne, in regional Melbourne, in Geelong. We then got that contract, and all of a sudden we started to get the ball rolling. You know, now both of us had some business exposure, but we'd never owned a business ourselves. So a lot of the experience that I have now is self-taught. It's things actually learning from what we did over, you know, the span of 8 years. And as the business went from being a startup to having a few employees, to then growing and then expanding into different states across Australia, and then offering different services, so nursing, occupational therapy, podiatry, we had to adapt and change along, you know. Then you've got COVID in the middle of that. We had to learn to adapt as we went along. So it was a very intensive 8 years of learning hands-on.
Yeah, wow. And so the initial days were just cold calling current aged care facilities. They already had the elder people inside, right?
Yep.
So then you're calling them and say, hey, we want to do the physiotherapy. These are the benefits to your existing clientele. Or were you trying to kind of get their clients and start your own facility, or was all the work done in their area?
Yeah. So a lot of them. So back then there was quite a lot of government funding provided to the facilities.
Okay.
To provide these services. So for us, the approach was always, cool. Do you have a provider? If not, then we can come in and we can help implement some systems and help you gain more of this government funding. We also spoke to them to understand what some of their pain points were. What are some of the challenges that you have with your current provider? You know, they're inconsistent. They change staff all the time. They don't really know what they're doing. You know, we get a lot of complaints. So we were able to use those pain points and really help us formulate our USP and go, well, look, we're going to guarantee that we give you the same person, they're going to come in on the same days, etc., to give you that consistency. Because when you think about the older population, you know, they're very much set in their routines. They wake up at the same time, they eat at the same time and everything else. So they need that stability and they need that continuity. And that was a big part of what we were focusing on.
And the service was provided in the facility
In the
itself.
facility,
Yeah. Okay. Amazing.
We then kind of branched out and diversified. So it was in the facility. We would have people that would come in on respite. So someone who might have fallen over, broken their hip, they need to go into an aged care facility until they recover. During that period, we would provide physio services for them. We would help rehabilitate them, get them back on their feet, get them walking again, back to where they were before the injury, right? And the intention was that once they do their 4 or 6 weeks of respite, they go back home. Now, the service that we provided was so good that we actually had those family members going, look, we don't want this to stop. What would it take for you to come and see us at home and continue seeing mum and dad and doing the physio? And so all of a sudden, our initial model, which was services in residential aged care, we expanded and diversified, and now we're providing in-home care services. So straight away, that was almost an opportunity that we kind of jumped on. Now, the business does about 25% in residential aged care and 75% in-home care across the elderly population and the NDIS.
Wow, that's a huge shift that you've gone through, and you kind of like founded by the demands of the market.
Absolutely. And we tried other things. So we were, in his home, and we were like, look, let's get an office. Let's kind of get out of the house, something a bit different. And we did. We got an office. We found a place in Cheltenham, right next door to Southland, where we could have half of it set up as an office, and we could actually have the other side as a treatment room. And I actually started consulting out of that as a physio to help offset and pay some of the rent of the office, and then we actually had a little office space. What we quickly found was that from a financial perspective, there was much more opportunity in the aged care space and in the in-home space because of the quality of the work that we were doing. And there weren't many other providers at that time that really had that high quality on focus, that high focus on quality.
Plus, it's very hard to scale as well. It's a unique service. Every home is in a different place. And then now I can see why it's hard, why the main challenge is hiring physiotherapists, because they need to live in a specific location, right? Like you can't just work in one crazy area in Melbourne and then travel all the way through.
Absolutely.
Like you go all these different areas and it becomes like a very complex web of different things, as opposed to, hey, here's the aged care facility, we do all the work in there. It's like very simple.
Yeah.
So that's pretty crazy. And could you tell me, like at some stage you mentioned your company, they had over 200 employees. And could you tell me about the chief operation officer lifestyle? And one of the funny things you mentioned was like the moment you walked into the office at 9 a.m., there's like people already like trying to grab you, like ask you all sorts of different questions. Could you tell a little bit about that experience and what your day-to-day looked like?
Yeah, absolutely. So towards the kind of last couple of years, we did have quite a large team. We'd actually expanded our service offering so that instead of just physio, we had physio, OT, podiatry, dietitians, speech, osteos, nursing, and each of those different disciplines are almost separate businesses within themselves. So you'd have a different management structure, they'd have different service models. And what we found was that because we'd grown laterally so wide and also grew geographically, so we branched out into New South Wales, WA and Queensland, that there was a lot that we were learning along the way and a lot that we had to bootstrap. So there would be days where I'd walk in and I remember our office, I'd tap in and there was a nice little meeting space right at the front, and there might be some clinicians or some of the team leaders sitting there working. And they'd see me and straight away they get up and they're like, oh, Matt, just quickly before you go, right? And just ask questions. And that's what it was. But the great thing is that that's the culture that we wanted to build. I'd been in previous organizations where I scaled with the organization. So I helped the organization scale internally.
Yeah.
And what we found is that as that organization scaled, and it's a common problem, that it lost the quality, it lost the culture. And there was a lot of staff leaving because hey, it's not what it used to be. And so for me, that was always at the forefront of my mind to go, as we continue to grow and scale, I want to make sure that there is that focus on the people. Because at the end of the day, and this is one of my favorite quotes from Richard Branson, clients don't come first, your employees come first. If you look after your employees, they'll look after the clients.
Yeah, wow.
And so for me, that was always, so we had an open door policy. You know, myself and my business partner at the time would, you know, if the team needed help, we'd go and we'd answer the phone. You know, we'd empty and we'd load and unload the dishwasher. You know, we weren't prepared to do anything that we didn't expect anyone else to do. And I think we gained a lot of respect from our team because of the way that we were.
Yeah, it's not like you have that back office like completely shelled off from everyone else. Like you're actually like kind of like almost in the trenches with the team, like trying to provide every little help and support that you can get.
Yeah.
Because ultimately you had the most amount of expertise as well, not only in depth, but like horizontally as well across the whole business. And that gave you the power to coach team members, help them with like even very precise questions.
Yeah.
And that's what they really appreciated.
Yeah, and it's something that I learned early on in my career. So I learned when I was back being a clinician hands-on that I could only impact a certain number of people a day. So if I'm seeing someone for half an hour, you know, and I'm working an 8-hour day, I can treat and help improve the life of 16 people in that day.
Yeah, wow.
You know, but there'd be hundreds in the aged care facility. So I was only one person. So I quickly realized that my true power was motivating, inspiring, mentoring, and supporting, you know, junior clinicians and colleagues so that we could have a greater reach.
Yeah, and at some stage the company was, well, how many people, like were how many employees did you have?
I think 200 was kind of the top of where we reached.
Yeah, wow. And you mentioned, and that's something that I really respect you for openly sharing as well, because all the entrepreneurship journeys are kind of like you start from nothing and it's very challenging in the beginning and then it skyrockets, and then you're sort of like, you know, like you kind of like the man and everything is happy and your whole life is sorted. But you have gone through an actual very challenging time personally that affected your business.
Yeah.
Would you be open to sharing as much as you can about that experience as well?
Absolutely. And obviously you know a bit about my story, but I was married, and when we started the business, I had a 6-month-old son. So it was all very new territory for me. And as you can imagine, the demands of the business, you know, were quite significant. So there was a lot of time where I wasn't home, you know, where I might be traveling away for work, where I've got a lot of priorities. Even if I was home, I might be on the phone, I might be on the laptop doing work. And so I'm now no longer married. And that was a really difficult time for me over the past few years. So one of the things that caused me to exit from Empower Healthcare was that I actually went through a divorce. So that divorce, and quite a difficult, nasty divorce, which went on for about 3 years. So from the point of separation, I think it was the 1st of April 2011, up until I think we had our court date on the 1st of May this year, you know, and then June we were finally divorced. So that period was probably the darkest and most stressful period of my life. And up until a year and a half ago, I was still working in the company. So I was navigating a separation, having to move out. I wasn't able to see my kids, and still had to walk into that office with a brave face,
perform
like
as well.
Everything is completely fine. Give my everything to everyone, when deep down inside I was a broken man.
Man, and I really respect you for like sharing this as well, because anything in life can happen. Like this is the thing. Like I'm currently growing my business very fast, and everything is amazing. And this is just the challenge of life. Unfortunately, the way the system works is like, I assume the business is tied up in the marriage, right? Like that's how the government kind of like sees it.
Not necessarily. So not directly. So my ex-wife never had anything to do with the business directly, but the argument in court was that the business itself was a matrimonial asset. So because the argument is that if my wife didn't stay at home to look after the kids, I wouldn't have been able to go off and build this business. And so therefore, she's entitled to part of the business, or at least that the business then goes into the asset pool with the house and all the other assets that we had.
Okay. All right. So you're pretty much settled now, and
Yep.
and it's all finalized. Are you still in the business? Are you doing consulting or kind of coaching in the business?
So no longer in Empower Healthcare. So back in about February of 2013, I decided that it was time for me to step down from my role, and I actually resigned as a director. as well. I sold the majority of my equity in the business to my business partners, and we had some investors that we brought on along the way. And a big part of that for me was because I no longer saw a purpose in working 12-hour days, 5-6 days a week, to continue trying to build this business when I didn't really have the time with my kids. And because I was so tied up with the business, it then meant that, I couldn't go and see my kids during the week. So I made a decision that, it's time for me to really evaluate what's important in life. And for me, it was the kids. I know that, you haven't got kids yet, and hopefully you'll have that joy soon. But for the parents out there, once you become a parent, it's almost like nothing else matters. Your whole demeanor changes. And I sat there one day and I'm like, why am I dealing with all this stress? Why am I putting up with this? So for me, it was a decision to go, it's time to step down where I can have more time at home so I can actually spend time with the kids. Do really basic things like take them to school, see them during the day. And I've got my daughter's turning 5 next month. So again, she was only 1 when the marriage ended. So a lot of her life, those early years, I wasn't there. She didn't see her dad. And for me, that was like, I can't have that. That's something that I need to change. And I can't go back and change the past, but I can certainly take action now and make sure that it changes in the future.
Yeah, that's such a powerful story. Now your values are changed. You value different things, also more time from home. And you've started doing coaching. You're also part of the Empowered Men group.
Yep.
Could you tell a little bit more about what Empowered Men is about and what you guys do?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Empowered Man is essentially a men's coaching program. The primary focus is to help men be the best version of themselves. So be better fathers, better husbands, optimize their health, their wealth, and their relationships. Now, a lot of the men that actually join the program are going through relationship issues, just like I did. Whether they're married, but they might have lost that passion in their relationship, whether they're separated or going through a separation and they're trying to get back together and bring their family back together, or whether they're divorced and, they're now starting to build their life again. In February of 2023, so last year, I left the company and I was at home for about 6 months trying to finalize the divorce. And for me, that was probably one of the most darkest times of my life. A lot of my family and my cousins can attest to where I was at and the person that I'd become. And I wasn't myself. I was in a very, very dark place. I'd resorted to things like drugs, alcohol to try and numb a lot of the pain. I no longer saw my kids every day. I wasn't in the business anymore. I felt like I had no purpose. I felt really alone and really isolated. And it got to a point where I needed to do something and I needed to get out of the house for my mental health. And I came across a position that was advertised. And here's the thing, Cos, you're a business owner, so you know what this is like. Once you're a business owner, it's really hard to go back into the workforce and work for someone else. So I'd actually gone back. I was approached by one of our competitors to go and work for them. And I did, and I probably lasted 4 weeks. Because I was in there, I'm like, why are you guys doing that? That doesn't make any sense. This needs to change. So it's really hard to go back. So I felt as though I was unemployable. Right, which then obviously didn't help the situation of my mental health at the time. So I came across an organization called the Empowered Man, and they were looking for a business coach, looking for someone who's got experience in business, who's really passionate about business. But when I understood what they were about, that really became appealing for me because during that period, I was trying to find something to do to give me a sense of purpose. I've got a cousin, shout out to my cousin, Andrew Gerges, who's got a barbershop, Upper Deck Barbershop, fresh fade, and he was starting up his barbershop, and so I was helping him with that. And that gave me a great sense of satisfaction, being able to impart wisdom and learnings of the things that I'd gone through in my business journey. So when I found this position become available, business coach, I'm like, well, I actually enjoy doing that. And I love business. For me, business is a hobby. So why not give it a go? And so that was in October of last year. I've been with them for a year and it's been absolutely amazing. The amount of men that I've been able to support who are navigating the legal system, who are going through difficult times, and I'm able to share my story and inspire them or support them through those dark times where I had no one to support me is phenomenal. I look back now, and a lot of the stuff that I was going through, I felt very alone and very isolated. And I wish that, I thought no one understood what I was going
You
through.
wish there was someone like yourself that
Absolutely.
could,
I
yeah.
wish I'd known about the empowered man back when I was married, and maybe things would be different. I'm not necessarily saying they were, because the complexities of why I left are quite dynamic, but they may have changed things. At the very least, when I was going through those dark times, if I'd had something like this, it probably wouldn't have gotten as bad as it did.
Man, and I can imagine with the wealth of experience that you have, building multi 8-figure business, managing over 200 employees, not only from a business perspective, but also what you've gone through kind of like as a man, through family. I think like, yeah, I don't think there's many coaches at that level. And what I think is amazing is that you're an actual coach with experience. You know how many people in our industry, the coaches on how to coach type of thing. And some people can get away with it, and they're like sort of like, oh, look at me, I make so much money. And that's the whole pitch to sign you as a client. But effectively, it's an empty shell. There's no back experience, nothing that the person can actually teach you. And we have in our advertising agency space is actually the same thing. There's people coming in and they say, hey, they have no experience, right? And then they say, hey, you're an agency owner, I can help you book 50 appointments a month. But they have never done anything before. And there are even people like, oh, I can help you start an advertising agency, but they have never signed any client, right? And what you also do, and the point that I'm trying to make, trying to drive home, is that you also do business coaching for different type of companies, because you've got like such a wealth of experience. Could you share a little bit about the consulting services and business coaches you do?
I love that you were laughing, because obviously we've had this conversation before, and when we first met as well, I felt as though you were really underselling yourself. Obviously I'm not going to name drop people, but you had a meeting with one of my personal idols, who is phenomenal. And just the fact that you said that you were meeting with him, that's right, I'm not going to say anything. I was like, wow, like this must be legit for you to get in front of that person. And then obviously telling me about your background and where you've worked in the past and everything else. So it's funny because you're spot on, right? People are trying to sell the lifestyle. People make it sound really easy. But let's be clear, man, it's not that fucking easy. And apologies for my French, but it's not that easy. What you do is very niche, and you're so good at what you do, right? I mean, obviously the cameras can't see it, but if we were to flip the cameras, we're sitting on the beach, right? I literally took a video just before this to go, hey, podcast ready, check out this view, right? So you've done it for a number of different organizations. You're doing it for yourself at a very high level, and you're living the lifestyle that people want to live.
And it's achieved because of the actual practice. It's not achieved because I said to someone like, hey, I'm a coach and I'm helping coaches make 10K a month online.
Yeah, I mean,
I've worked like it's legitimate big businesses. I work in different niches and industries, not like just one niche as well, like not just like e-commerce or like something else, like across different things. And yeah, I really appreciate you saying that. So like, with the services, beside Empowered Men, you do the kind of general or consulting services business. Like, could you tell a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple of things that I do. Number one is that I do one-on-one business coaching.
Okay.
I'm building a business coaching company in the background. But really where the one-on-one business coaching comes from is exactly that, right? I'm quite selective with who I work with. I'm not for everyone, right? I've amassed a lot of experience in business, and I know how hard it is, and I know how resilient you need to be. And I know that sometimes you need to just shut up, no excuses, and get the job done. And for me, it's about finding people that I connect with, finding people that I can see have the potential and want to learn and grow, and being able to almost be like a fractional business partner. Go, cool, hey, I'm here to help you, because the more successful you become, and it's selfish, right? But the more successful you become, the better it looks on me. right? Genuinely, because then it's like, hey, I actually know what I'm doing and I know what I'm talking about, right? Aside from the fact that that gives me a level of joy and satisfaction that money can't buy. I work with a lot of startups, a lot of younger people, and just the wisdom and the support and the knowledge that I can impart, and help see them grow in their journey. Like, I make a mandatory to celebrate at a few key milestones, right? If you're a startup, when you get your first client, we're going to celebrate, right? When you hit a certain figure, that might be 10K a month, we're going to celebrate, right? So for me, I love working with people and I love working with them in depth. I don't necessarily want to create a program and go, hey, watch these videos and pay me $5,000. It's about truly getting to know you as an individual, because at the end of the day, you are your business. If you're not performing, if you've got things going on at home, you're not going to deliver in the business. If you've got certain limiting beliefs, we need to address those and overcome them so that you can then catapult your growth in business. It might be some really basic things about having imposter syndrome and going, I'm not good enough. If you were to say to me, Matt, I don't feel like I'm good enough to compete with these big agencies. Why? You've already done it. What makes you think that? And that's one of the great things about the Empowered Man, because I went in there as a business coach, but I found myself doing a lot of life coaching and relationship coaching, all with the view to help them improve their business. So for me, I do a lot of one-on-one coaching. And if anyone would like to know about it, please feel free.
Where can we reach you, man?
Socials, so Instagram, Facebook, just look up Matthew Bassilios.
We'll drop the links like bold, like, hey, this
Awesome. Thank you,
this is where you can reach out.
Thank you.
Instagram,
Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, email. But yeah, at the end of the day, man, for me, it's about working with people. And let's be clear, and I've said this to you before, I probably wouldn't have amassed the success that I did in business had I not had people around me that would push me to grow, people that would mentor me, inspire me. And I see it as my obligation to do the same thing and to help people.
Sending the elevator down a little bit.
Absolutely. Because here's the thing, right? People are afraid of being judged. The reality is you're only going to get judged by those doing less than you. No one who's been more successful is going to turn around and go, Kos, what are you doing? Right? Genuinely.
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
They're going to go, hey, Kos, why don't you try this? Kos, why don't you try do that?
Yeah.
We in Australia, obviously we know about tall poppy syndrome, but everyone's quick to cut everyone else off. When we should be raising each other up and helping each other.
Yeah, I honestly haven't really experienced that too much here in Australia, maybe because I haven't been really I worked a ton of awkward jobs, like banana fruit picking, like fundraising. So it wasn't really I feel like I haven't worked 5-10 years or something like that in the industry. I haven't really experienced like that, but I do get a little bit what you're saying. People are super calm and relaxed here. It's like, hey, let's do the barbecue, let's just calm down. When you see across the trail racks, this is something what I've always been fascinated with, is how tradies work in Australia. It's like you have 5 people. They're supervising that one person that's working very hard. One's putting the hammer, and everyone else is saying hey, you have to do that. But that is crazy. And
I think the other thing as well is that I love working with startup businesses and small businesses.
Yeah.
I've worked in and for and with a lot of larger organizations or business. Even now through the Empowered Man, I work with a lot of men that have 9-figure plus businesses, right? So a lot of high value men. And don't get me wrong, I love working with them because they pose a completely different challenge, right? I really need to get into their head. But the impact that a business can have on someone's livelihood is phenomenal. It's life-changing. And it's not just life-changing for them, it's life-changing for their children and their children's children.
And the employees as well.
And the employees and everyone else in their network and the community. So if I can have a hand in that, and if I can help change their life, man, what kind of money can give you that level of satisfaction? Just the gratitude that you get from people, man. I had a really long day on Tuesday, so I was coaching for 8 hours straight from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And the last 2 calls of the day, one of them had said to me, you know, I said to him, look, I'm really impatient and I want faster results. And he's like, well, Matt, I've only been working with you for 3 months, and where I am compared to where I was is phenomenal. You know, let's have a look at the numbers. And we did, and we went back to before he started with me. I think we worked out, we had a 40% increase in revenue in the space of 3 months. And I just took that for granted, right? Because I'm like, cool, I want more. You know, let's go. There's more that we can do. Let's go. And he's like, but that in itself, he's like, for the first time, there's money saved up in the bank. We've been chasing our tail and living paycheck to paycheck for such a long time. And I was like, wow. You know, knowing that I've supported him and helped him achieve that is like, okay, cool. And he's got a baby coming up. You know, so think of how important that is for him to have that financial stability.
Man, that is phenomenal. I really want to thank you for coming today and sharing your story with an open heart. Not many entrepreneurs can do that, or they only share like their huge successes and it's like, oh, look at me, how great I am. But it's been deep, man. You've shared so much from how you grew your business from 0 all the way till multiple 8 figures, 200 staff, and then how you've transitioned into coaching, helping older men as well as normal businesses, small, medium-sized businesses. Thank you so much, Matthew, for coming today.
My absolute
really
pleasure,
appreciate it. And if you enjoyed this one, in the description below, the links, the socials of this man, and drop any questions, any likes. If you want to see more content, subscribe. And thank you so much for watching all the way through.
And make sure you give this guy a follow. He really, really underrates himself. And I've been trying to tell him that he needs to get his name out there more because he is living the dream. Like, I want you to post a picture of what I'm looking at outside the window right now.
Awesome, man.
Good to see you, my man.